Merlin Mines actually started out of necessity.
What makes Merlin Mines different from other solutions for DevOps or platform engineering?
Like I've built hundreds of applications with companies, big companies, small companies of all sizes. And there's never a one size fits all for most things. And so that's kind of what makes us different. There's a lot of really great people out there that want to get to market, especially in like the DoD space. So normally what ends up happening is they get this cool idea and they want to go to market, and then they get hit with all of the security requirements and the platform infrastructure. So some of our friends didn't make it because they didn't have Merlin's Mines. But the 0 to 1 phenomena of like, how do you go from idea to reality? That has been really hard.
Hi there, and welcome to the first episode of the Merlin Mines podcast series. I'm Kaemon Maggard, Customer Success Director, and in this series, we're going to be diving deep into the art and science of building transformative technological solutions. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Walter Day, the brilliant mind behind Merlin Mines. Walter, he's not just the owner and the founder, he's a seasoned expert in programming, automation, AI, and DevOps, all delivered in highly secure environments. His technical expertise and visionary leadership have driven game-changing results for a number of clients, such as Cole Engineering, ProFlight Systems, and Yuga Labs. Stay tuned as we discuss real-world case studies, the lessons Walter's learned from building solutions for some of the most demanding industries, and his top advice for businesses looking to thrive in today's fast-evolving tech landscape. With that said, let's dive in.
Let's go.
Let's...
Dude, King, what's up? How's it going?
Not much. Having a pretty good day. It's almost the weekend. Excited for my weekend plans. How's your day going so far?
It's been a good day. We've got a lot done. We finally got some good weather in Florida, so I'm enjoying it while we can.
Nice. Yeah, it's finally not like 80 degrees.
Right. So I'm very excited about that.
Nice. Yeah, it's super cold in Atlanta, at least for like a native Floridian. I think it was like 40 degrees when I woke up today. And the high is 50. So we're in for a really chilly weekend, especially for my outside stuff.
Let's go. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, I think we're here to jam on some like questions. So where do you want to start?
Yeah. So I've talked to you about this a good deal, but for anyone who hasn't, just start by sharing the story of what inspired you to start Merlin Mines, and then how has your vision with it evolved over the years?
Yeah. So Merlin's Mines actually started out of necessity. We were growing as a family and we had an opportunity to get our first home. And so I started this business as a way for us to start a little nest egg and prepare for that. And I never really expected it to become what it is today. And now we have like 8-ish employees. We've changed from strictly like consulting into products and services. And we're working towards releasing our flagship product, which is Spellcarver, which is pretty cool. So that's like a CI/CD tool with some AI and like developer features, which I'm really excited about. And so it's moved from like Walter's vision for how he can manage his day-to-day life into this cool company where everybody's getting to shape what we look like and what we're going to become. So I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome. So to kind of hone in on the evolution of it, is this something that whenever you started, was your expectation that Merlin Mines was always just going to be a solo one-man show? Or had you always planned to grow it to having multiple people involved?
Great question. Originally, I was just excited to have a little extra bread in the bank. So the direction forward was like, whoa, how do we keep doing this? This is fun. And it became like, how do we actually like find a way for all of us to work and live together to kind of build this thing that has kind of taken on an identity of itself, which I'm really excited about. And so that's kind of what it's become so far. I guess the easiest way to like kind of answer that question is like, what do I not want this to become? I don't want this to become like a traditional startup where the individuals get compromised to do this thing called scaling.
Mm-hmm.
And in return, we end up being like put on the hook for a bunch of things that need to be delivered that don't necessarily bring the actual customers value, and instead work towards building products and services that actually make people's lives better and help them build their products.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you said it beautifully before, in that most startups will grow and scale no matter the cost, but no matter the cost is too high of a cost for you, which I think is a great outlook.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like we may need to scale to 20 or 30 people at some point, but we'll do it in a way that's healthy. So we don't have to just mysteriously lay people off on a Thursday afternoon because we have to. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to be smart with that so everybody can have a good quality of life.
Excellent, excellent. So with Merlin Mines, what to you has been the most rewarding part, specifically with like helping businesses be better and like streamline their operations or achieve their goals?
Yeah, so I'm going to take you back a little bit and then get back to the question because I think
Yeah.
it's important. So we do a lot of platform services, infrastructure as code, automation. So that has kind of been my wheelhouse, my bread and butter for a long time. So when you're like, what's the most rewarding part? For me, it's like the train tracks are finally starting to reveal themselves for what we're going to build and what that means past like the current customer set. I'm noticing that like a lot of our customers that are going to market have very similar problems, which is pretty standard when you're in the cloud industry or startup industries. And so it's like, well, how can we provide great quality service to, like ProFlight, helping their small company grow to like 30 people and then prepare to take, maybe 10 or 100,000 customers to the point where like now we have like a SaaS service that provides most of that functionality without a lot of the overhead, with the option for some consulting services if they need extra help. So now that we're roughly 8, it's becoming a lot clearer on like, oh, wow, this is where we need to go right now because this is what the market's telling us, which I think is very rewarding because for years it was like running around with a chicken with my head cut off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting to see and be part of it growing, and it's. I think it says a lot about an executive whenever they get to the point where they've built something great and they're able to delegate things out, so it's not just a one man band, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole like if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's super cliche, but it's very true.
Yeah, I mean it's cliche for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so you've talked a bit about kind of the focus of Merlin Mines and like what you're aiming to do for these businesses. What makes Merlin Mines different from other solutions for DevOps or platform engineering?
Yeah, I think this is like a really great question for where the industry is lacking. Right now, I see a lot of products and services that are like, we do a thing and that thing brings a lot of value to our customers. But the delivery of that thing tends to be like the last resort. It's like normally how a startup happens is you have like some sort of technical guy or several technical people, and they're working to like build this MVP and ship it out the door. Then like, that's it, right? Like that's kind of where it ends until they need to scale. And so usually DevOps becomes a commodity. And so for me, what makes this different is actually taking the time to understand the needs of the company and designing solutions that, are graceful and intelligent and help them scale into that. And so I think it's important to like meet the founders where they are, help them understand like what it's going to cost, both the total cost of ownership for the platform or any of the like security risks, et cetera, that we're going to need to solve before we can get to that next phase. But that's what makes us different. Like I've built hundreds of applications with companies, big companies, small companies of all sizes. And there's never a one size fits all for most things. And so that's kind of what makes us different. We kind of understand where you are and want to help you get to the next phase.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'd say that the thing that sets Merlin's Mines apart from, or restart that question. So you'd say that something that sets Merlin Mines apart from other solutions in the space is really just taking the time to understand what exactly the client needs, in addition to knowing the space and taking kind of that hands-on and that personal approach, as opposed to doing something that's, one size fits all or a means to an end, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other part there is a lot of bigger firms have this like rubber stamp approach where it's like, this is how you're going to do our software if you want us to give you service level agreements to support your products and services. And I don't think that really works for smaller firms because that usually like prices them out at this like crazy enterprise offering. Makes sense for really, really big companies. It's just very hard to swallow when you're less than 50 people. And so being able to kind of meet them where they are and having the expertise to tailor solutions for different price points, I think is really a competitive advantage for what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of these specific companies, starting with one of the companies that is a bit on the smaller side. You've already referenced ProFlight. So ProFlight Systems, they've had to navigate some really stringent cybersecurity requirements to obtain their ATO. So what steps did Merlin Mines take to make it possible? And then how would those lessons apply to other highly regulated businesses?
Yeah, so Proflight's one of my favorites, primarily because I built a lot of ATO factories with a lot of different people. We did some with VMware, we did some with Rancher. I've done some on-prem here with some for Cole Engineering and a few other firms. I think the thing that's really exciting about Proflight systems is they're your stereotypical example of, hey, I have these founders that have built this application and we need to get it into a government approved environment. And on paper, it sounds super simple, but like without someone who's kind of gone through the trenches to kind of understand the security requirements, the SAS, DAS, CVEs, the border diagrams, the AO, what is the AO is sorry, I'm trying to remember this word.
Authority to operate?
No, there's basically the AO is the person that you have to like submit all of your documents to for them to like give you the blessing. So
PMO maybe?
I think it's an AO, but I don't remember what it is. But that's fine. That's not important. What is important is that like this was the first one I did all by myself. Kind of like, normally you have one person who does one section, one person who does the next, et cetera, et cetera. And I did the whole life cycle from cradle to grave of kind of getting them through the pipeline and making them have a successful adventure. A lot of that's also due to a great partner through Second Front Systems. We were able to get a slot on Game Warden, which gave us most of the AWS infrastructure we needed to kind of meet that border, like security border control to make that happen. But the application's secured. We just got our IL4 accreditation ATO, and so we're ready to start facilitating like real tail numbers. And that's really exciting. I think the big thing about platform engineering and DevOps, especially for a small firm, is it's really hard to see the value in the beginning because you're burning a lot of capital to kind of get the rails laid. And then after that, you kind of get that velocity for like continuously getting your ATO, which you normally don't get in like a normal firm. Normally you have like a set of engineers that are always building all the time. And so your ATO process can take like 6 to 12 months. And so for us, we had the fastest accreditation in Second Front history, which happened in 6 days. And we can update production just about hourly if we need to, so long as we meet the security requirements, which the platform now provides. So that's really cool.
Okay, awesome, incredible. That's a great example. Well, so you're talking a bit about, scrappy startup businesses. Let's kind of pivot over to a business that's a bit more established. So let's talk about Cole Engineering. So building an internal dev platform for over 100 developers, that's no small feat. So how did you approach the scale and the security challenges with that contract?
Yeah, so that one's a little different because they own their own. So this is like life cycle of a business, right? So Cole Engineering is much older, much bigger. They've got thousands of developers across different projects and things like that. So they also have their own data center, internal, right? Corporate data center. Mm-hmm. And so when we structure security and things like that, we're dealing mostly with people that are like disconnected from the internet most of the time. And so the platform needs to be offline enabled in a way that we can kind of deliver that quality service they would expect to get from like a GitHub or a GitLab online without needing access to internet resources. And so that one's a little different. Normally in the normal world, you would like, as a developer, you would onboard to a platform and then you would have access to all of your pipelines and your services and things like that. And that works really, really well until about 15 people. And then what ends up happening is like everybody's updating code all the time. There's maybe, you go from, maybe like 10 pull requests per day, 10 changes per day to hundreds of changes per day. And so the testing and the quality of service and things like that life cycle has to change. And so you move from like a decentralized CI/CD solution to a centralized CI/CD solution. That way, as developers are getting onboarded, and a set of developers is probably like a team of 10. And so you can't really give them free reign over everything. So we have to keep control of security, compliance, who's pushing code, who's not. We need a way to keep track of records so that like if we get audited by the government, we can prove that the work that's being done is the work that's being done. And so we move to like a centralized platform, meaning that like when a developer onboards, they have an intake form and they say like, I want these 12 features, and then that gets enabled for all of their projects. So basically as a developer, you just have to know what you want in the beginning. There's like a simple plain text that you ask and that gets enabled to the platform. And then no matter what you do for the rest of your life cycle in the Cole Engineering build system, that service is provided to you without you ever having to know anything about it ever again. And so that way, as your team grows, maybe you're onboarding junior developers or you're doing whatever, you get to keep your velocity without having to worry as much about like the new person needing to be spun up on like all these bespoke tools. And so I think that's really, really cool.
Excellent. Okay, and so kind of a follow-up on that with two parts. So what impact did doing that for Cole Engineering have on their success? And then the second part of that being, what lessons could other owners take from that?
So one of the big ones I think is really important is delivering value to the customers. Like in our case, it tends to be government customers, and getting their applications that they're paying for in their hands is a process. And so, for example, we had an application that had errors, that had some security errors going into like a Thursday afternoon. And like within 24 hours, we were able to turn that around and get that back to them. So that would normally be a security process that would take like a week or two. And so like the big value gain there is like, there's a lot of upfront costs to building out like an internal developers platform, but the ROI is like the golden goose of the DoD, which is what they call like an ATO factory, where like you have artifacts that come in one side and they always come out secure on the other, which makes it really easy to deliver value to your customers because you paid for everything up front instead of like paying for it at the end, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think the for other founders that are trying to do similar things, I would say that most of these problems can't be solved with tools off the shelf. It's not that there aren't great off the shelf tools. It's that everybody has their own way of doing something that might not necessarily be how your AO is expecting those artifacts to be delivered. And so some things just need to be tweaked in a way where you can pay for it up front instead of like paying for it at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a huge lesson to take away. Okay. Well, talking about another one of these businesses you've worked with. So you've worked with Yuga Labs quite a bit, and they faced a lot of scaling challenges. And with that, they were trying to balance their costs and their productivity. So how did Merlin Mines help them achieve operational scalability and cost optimization?
Yeah, so this is coming at the problem from a different life cycle. So I want to set the precedence here. Like this is what I would consider an enterprise type company. And so with big enterprise companies comes very large AWS bills, hundreds of thousands of dollars every month. And so when you're dealing with that kind of scale, usually what happens is the total cost of ownership for a developer isn't like basically owned by that team. So like good best practice would be like, hey, Kaemon, I am the leader, and I say that your team can have a cloud spend of $10,000 per month. And if you go above that budget, then that comes out of like the bonuses everybody gets, because that it costs more to run your stuff than the money we make off of it, if that makes sense. And that's kind of like a better practice for ensuring that like people like own their stuff. But a lot of times with startups that are scaling super rapidly, they end up like leaving a lot of dead bodies and skeletons in the closet. And so basically we come in, we say, okay, what's your target goal? We want to cut our AWS bill from $250,000 a month or $450,000 a month to $150. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, let's have a conversation about that. Like we've had some downsizing, but we still have all this AWS cost. Okay, cool. So what do you know about your platform? Well, it all depends. Some people have like really great metrics on like where everything lives. Amazon does a really interesting job of how it aggregates cost. And so what it usually ends up happening is that there's a firm will go to AWS or Amazon, and they'll say, hey, I want to buy this much compute from you, and I promise I'll pay for it for years, if that makes sense. And so usually you have like an organization account that spawns different teams. So you'd have like a developer account or whatever, it doesn't matter. And then what ends up happening is like basically when the children or like the dev team or the security team use those resources, it doesn't actually allocate those resources in that account. It gets charged to the org. And so it becomes very difficult to see like which org is costing the most money, if that makes sense. And so usually the place where we come in is kind of understanding the total bill, right? Not just the bill of like, oh, the security team says they have this much. So like, I don't know, let's say they had a $40,000 a month bill. And it's like, oh, they actually only had a $8,000 a month bill, but because of the way that it's looking at compute, it looks like it's much larger. even though that cost is there. It was paid over like 3 years. And so it's like 60% cheaper today than it was 3 years ago. And so it looks weird. And so like the real thing we do there is we have software written to kind of help understand that cost and then battle plans for cutting that ruthlessly until we're back down to the number that they're looking for.
Got it. So basically being able to take all these different confusing metrics and using the software to make sure it tells a story
that's the real story.
Yeah. And then from okay, now we know what's really happening. Now we can go and fix the problem. Because if you don't know what's actually happening, then there's no way to be accurate and to drive the results you're aiming for and hit those goals, right?
Right. Yeah. So that's like the big issue is like, especially when teams downsize or like, maybe a team got decommissioned and reprioritized to something else. Most of the times developers aren't on the hook to clean that up, right? That's a different team. And so they just go on to their next thing, they leave their cruft and it's just kind of there. And then AWS has a lot of, and they're honest about it, which is something I really appreciate. Like they send you emails like, hey, buddy, if you don't start dealing with this, it's going to cost you an extra $1,000 a month or whatever. But, over the years, you kind of lose track of all that stuff. So we've got a database of like best practices for dealing with that. And it's really easy to save cash once you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so these projects with Cole Engineering and Yuga Labs are really rather complex. So for the business owners that are listening to this, how can they know when it's the right time to bring in an expert like you? How do they know they should be making that decision?
Yeah, this is something I grapple with a lot. It's like you really don't know when everybody's like, oh, I need to build a solution that's ready to scale forever, like today. And to be fair, you probably don't, right? Like you're looking for a solution that can feed you until you can get to your next big milestone. And so for that, it's like, I would say if you're thinking about scaling, it's probably time to have a conversation, right? The earlier, the better. The earlier you can loop us in, the less it's going to cost you in the long run. And I think that's kind of like shown some value with a few of our other customers. Like for example, a lot of times people will just throw their code into like a Lambda instance or a Google Cloud Run instance. And so you don't have to worry about anything. You kind of like just get to put up the blinders and be like, you got it, Google, help me out. But when you do that, you don't really like, it starts off really affordable, kind of like for sale. And it's like, oh, $20 a month, $30 a month. This is amazing. And then you start scaling and you start getting like, $100,000 bills from AWS for your 12 Lambda instances. And you're like, I don't understand why this is happening. Meanwhile, if you had just like talked to us earlier, we could have got you, Kubernetes cluster with an autoscaler and an automatic deploy for probably less than $400 a month with autoscalers set up for production to scale up and down from like whatever it is that you need for your like Black Friday deals to save you a ton of money.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's all about, making that investment at the right time. And so basically if you're thinking about scaling, then you should be meeting with someone like that. Or I'd imagine if you've already started scaling, you're starting to run into these problems, but the earlier you can do it and you can make that initial investment, the more potential it has to pay off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing you want to do is take your unicorn away from building your app. And what ends up happening is like your CTO or your director of engineering or your like all-star engineer like has to go deal with this scaling problem. And so then they're stuck dealing with the scaling problem and not building the revenue features, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so normally it's like, oh no, like if you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, I really need to build this feature, but man, AWS is beating me up. That's probably time to call us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And that kind of leads into the next thing. Like so many business owners, they're struggling with the growth versus cost efficiency. So what's one piece of advice you'd give them to get started?
Yeah. So first things first, if you've got venture capital backing, you can usually get AWS credits or GCP credits or Azure credits. Pick your favorite cloud. We support all of them. And that'll get you enough runway to get like, they usually give between $100,000 and $250,000, which is enough to get any startup like in the cloud, good to go, no cost out of your pocketbooks. So really the total cost of ownership ends up being like we onboard, we have the conversation with AWS for you. If you want, we can help you figure that solution out. And then from there, we can move forward, which I think is super helpful. Because the last thing you want to do is like, be like, oh man, it's going to cost me this much money in AWS spend to do what we need to do. Like get prepared before and move forward from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So just kind of drill into that a bit more. So if someone's thinking about building or optimizing their internal platforms, then what's the first step that you think they should take with that? And how could Merlin Mines potentially help with that?
Yeah, so just like building any sort of code base, right? Understanding the requirements for the application. Like, are you API driven? Do you need persistent storage? Like, just kind of understanding the primitives of that. And then from there, we can kind of take that into like the cloud to have like a Knative approach to solving most of these business problems. Most of these business problems just disappear when you control your own platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just comes, it all ties back together. It's a matter about making that investment at the right time.
Yeah,
And if you're
absolutely.
thinking about scaling, it's that time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think like just to caveat that, if you're like, oh man, I don't know if we need this right now. We have a lot of great, like what I would call like startup, like incubator, like stand-up programs. So like if you're looking to get your product into a place where you have like an internal development platform with like an internet facing whatever with, you know, an API gated by any, insert your favorite variety of security. We've got really quick stand-ups for that. So if you're just looking to kind of test it out, test the waters, we do have some programs available right now to kind of like help you get there.
Okay, got it. Okay, so you've helped companies navigate some highly secure environments. You've helped them with scaling. You've worked in a lot of different situations. So I would ask you kind of a big question, but like looking back, what would you say is your proudest achievement with Merlin Mines so far?
Oh man, with Merlin Mines so far, I think what's really cool is I get to do the stuff that I love all the time and people want to pay me for it. It's less so about like, hey, what is the best thing that you've done? And it's more about, wow, like look at all these founders we've helped go to market. That's really important to me. I am more in line with, there's a lot of really great people out there that want to get to market, especially in like the DoD space. And so normally what ends up happening is they get this cool idea and they want to go to market, and then they get hit with all of the security requirements and the platform infrastructure, blah, 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 and they run out of money. And so my favorite part so far about building Merlin's Mines has been we've been able to help ProFlight, a couple other customers get to market before they would have died on the vine. So some of our friends didn't make it because they didn't have Merlin's Mines. They ran out of money, and that was that. And so, you know, if you get blessed with some angel funding, or you're able to secure some like cyber funding from the government, anything we can do to make sure you get where you need to go to service your customers before you run out of cash, like that's been great. We've helped tons of people do that, and I'm really grateful to have that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway from it. It's like rather than touting like a technical solution or something you've done, it sounds like the thing you're most excited about is that you've helped the people behind these operations succeed.
Yeah, that's the best part.
Excellent. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the success and exciting things that's happened at Merlin Mines. What's one challenge you faced while growing Merlin Mines, and what did you do to overcome it?
Yeah, it's the whole, and again, we're not startup based, but the 0 to 1 phenomena of like, how do you go from idea to reality? That has been really hard, both from there's quite a few consulting firms. There's quite a few like DevOps-y type platform infrastructure observability firms. And so like getting those first few clients, understanding their needs, and kind of like checking the ego at the door. Most people don't care about the cool solutions you have to offer. They care about how you can provide better services to their customers. And so like basically like as an engineer, I was taught how to build all these crazy tools and do all this fun stuff so that we could like build something cool, and kind of shifting out of that modal into like, how do you deal with customer success? Like when you're onboarding people, how do you make sure that you actually capture things that they care about, and you're not just like selling them a one-size-fits-all solution? That's been really challenging. And then, I think right under that is like finding killer talent that actually like wants to help people, rather than like the standard like tech solution where it's like, or tech employee where they're like, yeah, I'm here for like a year, bro, and then once I get my stock options, I'm out. So that's been hard.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes that makes a lot of sense. Okay. And then I would say kind of like reflecting on both like what you're very proud of as well as the challenges. for speaking to the business owners that are listening, what's one key mindset or strategy or something you've done that's driven your success and might be able to help them too? What's something you give them as a piece of advice?
Yes. So there's like this book called The War of Art, and it talks about this thing called resistance. And so resistance shows up every day in like everything you do, where you're like, oh man, I don't want to do this. It's hard. And so for me, like the ability to keep showing up, like that is a superpower for any founder to just like, even when it sucks, keep showing up. And then to kind of like pin that hook on, if you're beating your head against something for more than an hour, you're probably doing something wrong. Not to say that all problems can't be solved in an hour. That's a pipe dream. But usually you're trying to, you're trying to go through the wall and not the door. So take a step back, go for a walk, take a breather, come back to it. Usually the answer will find you. That's kind of like my wax on, wax off, Mr. Miyagi approach to these types of things.
Yeah, I love that. You told me that too. And it's worked. I remember being stuck on something for an hour and a half. And you told me, man, Kaemon, go take a walk, get out of your chair. And I did it, and I came back and realized that the problem wasn't with any of the tech. The problem was between the chair and the computer.
Yeah, that tends to be the problem.
Okay. So if listeners want to explore how you could help them with their businesses, what would be the best way for them to get started?
Yeah, so there's direct links on the website to schedule a call if you'd like to. You can also reach out to Kaemon, who is currently giving this interview. He's our, what are you calling yourself these days, Kaemon?
I think a client success director. So
client success director, yeah, that's great.
So it's funny asking you this because I should really probably be answering it. Send me an email or go to our website. Or if you talked to me before or any of us, say, hey, I want to get in touch with Kaemon. On the website, there's a link. It gives you direct access to my calendar with the only restriction of it during my working hours. And I probably want at least like an hour or two heads up. And don't worry, it accounts for that. So go in there, grab a time that works for you, and we'll get connected. Super easy peasy. I really just need your contact info. I give you the option to tell me a little bit of stuff ahead of time. And you don't even have to. We can handle it all during the call. Make it easy. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, talk to Kaemon. He can help you. And if you can't find Kaemon, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. My DMs are open. I'm happy to reach out and talk with you. Or if you're a Twitter person, I'm there too. Yeah, just whatever platform you need, we're there. So happy to chat with you.
Cool. All right. So what's one thing that you wish more business owners knew about working with an expert like you in this space, and how could they take that first step with Merlin Mines?
Yeah, so I think empathy is really big in the tech space because everybody is so busy with their solutions. And I know as a founder or a builder, depending on which side of the house you're on, you might not know all the technical terms that go into a delivery. And so I think the thing that you'll take away from our conversation is I'm going to meet you where you are, no matter what that is, technical or non-technical, and try to design a solution in a language that you'll understand. I think that's really important. Everybody, especially like in the DevOps space, there's all these magic words for like omni platforms or edge computing or I don't know, insert your favorite variety of this week's version of buzzwords. And quite frankly, that doesn't really matter. What matters is, your customers and your issues and what we can do to solve that together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I'll give you huge props for, because I'm not a technical guy in the way that you are. That's just not my background. And I've known you for many years now. And something you've always excelled at is doing a really good job of understanding where people are coming from a sympathy, from an empathy standpoint, but also from like their understanding of what they're working with in their language. Because you're right, like the tech field is notorious for buzzwords, and it's hard to keep up with them. There's there are new exciting buzzwords every couple of days, it feels like, and you always do a good job of boiling that down into a way where kind of being able to identify okay, how much does this person understand? Is this right? Is this like a CTO, or is this like a CEO who doesn't really have a technical background and found himself in this space? Is this somebody who's been tasked with finding the solution and being able to really speak their language and meet them where they're at without doing all these flashy buzzwords like a magician trying to bedazzle their audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of value especially in this AI industry. Like, there's a lot of value in the human connection right now, and so I try to keep that alive best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of that ethos as well. Okay, now for someone who feels like they might be stuck with their current platform or their processes, or dealing with a bit of vendor lock, what can they expect if they book a call with you?
Yeah, so depending on where you are, whether you're on-prem or not, will dictate usually your vendor lock-in. And don't worry, there's always hope, no matter where you are in that life cycle, even if you've got big obligations for contracts and things like that for like VMware, for example, or maybe IBM. And so normally what we'll do is we'll try to understand okay, what year of the life cycle are you in with your renewals, and what is the openness and opportunity to pivot to open source. Not to say that if a solution is paid, is it better? It might have what you need, it might be better, right? But normally the move is to try to get into an open source, at least hybrid model, where you have some of your services that are moved to the platform team, while some of your services are still owned by big corporations. And I think it's just really important to have that conversation. I know there's a lot of resistance to kind of get off of the vendor. Well, let me back up. I know there's a lot of resistance for getting onto open source, primarily because there's SLAs and things that a company might need in order to provide a service to an enterprise. And I think there's a lot of value in that. But a lot of times those vendors don't provide the flexibility a company needs to actually provide value to their customers. And so I'd rather have a conversation with you, because I've worked in places where they bind you and wrap your feet up and put you in a corner in a dark closet, and they're this is how you get to develop. And so it's I'm with you. I've seen those problems, and it's just how do we find a way to deal with the bureaucracy to help you get what you need?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would chime in to add this piece too. For someone who feels like they're stuck, what can they expect out of this? Is something I'll stress is the only thing that figuring this out, that meeting with Merlin Mines is going to cost. Just to figure out these potential solutions, it's only going to cost a bit of time. We're not charging anything for this initial DevOps assessment, and we're excited to help point people in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, conversation's free, right? More than anything, I just want to help people help their customers. So if you need help, we're happy to have a conversation.
All right, so I'll ask you. So we've talked a lot about different technical accomplishments and the different businesses you've worked with in your approach, but I'll ask you this, Walter. Are there any personal experiences or lessons that have perhaps shaped how you approach solving these complex problems for your clients?
Oh, yeah. So my career started out at Kennedy Space Center, and I was working on EM1, which is now Artemis. And so I got trained by a bunch of old wizards from the space shuttle days. And so normally, and plus my background's a little unconventional. When you go to college for computer science, a lot of times you get taught a particular way to think about something. And so you don't usually get a holistic approach to what I would consider to be real computer science. And so what ends up happening is you get really good at C++ and Java, and you get the basics of networking, and you can run a bash script or whatever on a Linux terminal, but you don't understand how all the pieces go together. And so for me, my biggest lesson from those old graybeards was to always start at the root of the problem, and that the logs never lie, right? And so a lot of the times, you'll be doing something, you'll have this, oh, we're stuck, this problem, we can't get around it. And it's oh, well, did you zoom out? Did you look at the forest before the trees? Find the actual tree that, was dying and go down to the root and find it? Usually that answer is no, right? People just are this is my tree and it's broken. And so that's kind of my superpower, is making sure we actually understand the problem before we're spending money trying to solve it.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say that your background, you talked about, if you go to school for computer science, you're kind of a little bit put into a box or told, be like, this is the box you should be expecting to work in, and the real world isn't like that. You didn't study computer science. You studied political science, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Do you think that perhaps like coming from something that was a bit different, or that so much of your training was like on the job or in preparation for a job, do you think that's part of what gave you this ability to approach things, differently?
Yeah, but I'm going to take that in a different direction. So there's like two types of knowledge in my eyes. There's organic knowledge that you acquire from like living and breathing and doing things. And there's like, synthetic knowledge where like you go somewhere and you sit and you listen and you learn and you like synthesize that synthetic knowledge to kind of like do something, whether that's pass a test or write an algorithm or do whatever. And so when you're like, what is it about your background that made you so good at this? I would say that everything I know I learned organically because I wanted to, and I had a real business reason to solve the problem, not because someone came to me and said, hey, you're not going to get an A if you don't do this. And so a lot of the times when I come to solve a problem, I have a lot more background knowledge than most because I came up in a time before ChatGPT when you used to have to read to solve these problems. And so, that usually helps me solve problems in a way that actually solves the problem instead of just like taking care of the symptom.
Got it. Okay. Well, what's a moment when you realize that the work you're doing here at Merlin Mines was like really making a difference for businesses? Was there one clear moment with that?
I would say there's been several, but the most important one is ProFlight. They've acquired a SIBR from the government, and so they only get paid for their deliveries, if that makes sense. And so like one of the big achievements for me is just like, as we deliver, we get paid. And so it's like, you kind of get to see like the business grow and succeed. And that's like, your hand is like directly involved in that. It's not like a normal, like built with you consulting model where your staff aug and like you just handle the day to day. It's like the success of the business only happens when a delivery is delivered, if that makes sense. So that's been huge for me. It's kind of shown the value of like, there isn't always a time to money exchange. Sometimes it's just like which lever will provide the value that we need to give our customers that next big milestone. And I try to think about that more and more because more times than not, that's usually the case for founders.
Got it. I think that's, I don't think there's anything I can add to that. I think that was a great ending note.
If you're interested in speaking with us or meeting with us just to get some ideas on solutions that could work for you and your business or a new business you're looking to start, head over to merlinmines.com. There will be a meeting link right there so you can schedule a time to meet directly with us or just shoot us a LinkedIn message. We aim to be really easy to reach.